Imagine you live in a city where everyone believes the gods keep the world standing, the harvest coming, and the plagues away. Then a group of your neighbors announces they refuse to honor any of those gods. Ever. They won't sprinkle a pinch of incense on the altar. Now your crops fail. A plague strikes. You blame the people who angered the gods. Romans didn't persecute Christians because they were intolerant fanatics. They persecuted Christians because they genuinely believed everyone's safety depended on honoring the gods, and Christians refused. Understanding this logic is the key to understanding everything that followed. To understand why Romans persecuted Christians, you first have to understand what religion meant in Rome. For Romans, piety, Pietas, was not a private feeling, it was a civic duty. Romans believed they were the most religiously observant nation on earth and that their devotion explained their success. When Roman armies entered new territories, soldiers sacrificed to local gods. They absorbed foreign religions. They didn't destroy them. Rome had room for hundreds of gods. Right? The problem with Christianity wasn't theological disagreement, it was exclusivism. And the Christians worshipped only one God and refused to honor any other. That broke the social contract. Here's how Romans saw the causal chain. Citizens honor the gods protect Rome, ensuring prosperity, military victory, and safety. Roman civilization endures, every link depends on the one before it. When Christians refuse to sacrifice, they break the first link. And when the chain breaks, divine punishment doesn't fall only on Christians. It falls on everyone. A neighbor who won't sacrifice isn't exercising personal conscience. The neighbor endangers your family, your city, your empire. Refusing to sacrifice to the emperor wasn't a matter of belief. It was sedition. And that was the logic. And here's what persecution looked like in practice. For most of the 2nd century, persecution was sporadic and local. Roman authorities didn't launch coordinated campaigns. Local governors responded to complaints. Mobs turned on Christian neighbors. Officials targeted visible leaders, bishops, and prominent figures. The forms varied enormously. At the extreme, execution by crucifixion, spectacle killings in the arena. But much persecution was softer. Denial of military promotion, expulsion from the army, social ostracism. Christians weren't hunted door to door. They faced a patchwork of local hostility that fled and subsided unpredictably across provinces and decades. Then came 250 CE, and the Decian persecution changed everything. Emperor Decius issued the first empire-wide systematic order. Every Christian must sacrifice to the emperor or face consequences. This wasn't a local mob. This was the full machinery of the Roman state. Authorities targeted clergy specifically, forcing them to surrender sacred scriptures. The goal was to break the institutional backbone of the church. Decius wanted compliance, not punishment. The Decian persecution marked the shift from scattered local hostility to organized imperial policy, and it forced Christians to confront a new reality. The empire itself had turned against them. Here's where the story turns. Christians didn't just suffer persecution, they built an entire theology around it. The word martyr comes from the Greek for witness. Dying for the faith wasn't meaningless pain, it was testimony. Christians framed martyrs as soldiers in God's army and deliberately borrowing Roman military imagery and turning it against Rome. The theological claims were bold. Martyrs enjoy special closeness to God. They proceed directly to heaven with no intermediate waiting state, and their suffering is spiritual combat, a battle as real as any fought with swords. Roman violence didn't destroy the church. It produced the church's greatest heroes. This theology created a concrete spiritual hierarchy. At the top, martyrs, those killed for the faith. They received the highest privileges, direct entry to heaven, special closeness to God. Below them, a category most people overlook, confessors. A confessor was someone condemned to martyrdom but not killed. Perhaps the sentence was commuted, or they survived imprisonment. Confessors carried elevated spiritual status and real authority within the community. At the base, ordinary believers, faithful Christians not subjected to persecution. The result was a status system born entirely from suffering. The more you endured, the higher your standing. Persecution didn't weaken the community's structure. It defined it. Christians weren't the only ones shaping the narrative. Educated pagans were watching. Galen, the greatest medical writer of antiquity, dismissed Christians as superstitious. A God who experiences anger, philosophically absurd. Yet Galen admired their courage in facing death. Gelsius was harsher. Christianity could only convince old women, slaves, and children. Credulous nonsense. But even Celsus acknowledged their bravery, calling it foolhardy recklessness. Both critics attacked Christian theology, both grudgingly respected Christian conviction. In response, Christian apologists, from the Greek apologia, meaning formal defense, like Justin Martyr, wrote systematic rebuttals against charges of sedition and superstition. Intellectual defense wasn't the only Christian response to a hostile world. Some chose a radically different path, withdrawal. Monasticism emerged as Christians retreated from worldly hostility to pursue spiritual discipline. The key concept is asceticism, from the Greek askesis, meaning exercise. Monks train the body and soul through deprivation, no sex, restricted food, no wine. Not because pleasure was inherently sinful, it wasn't. Because discipline was the path to spiritual strength. St. Anthony, the emblematic figure, withdrew alone into the Egyptian desert. There he battled demons disguised as seductive young men and women. His resistance through bodily deprivation became legendary. Two distinct models of monastic life emerged. Eremitic monasticism, from the Greek eremos, meaning desert, followed Anthony's path. Solitary withdrawal, individual discipline, battling temptation alone in the wilderness. Cenobitic monasticism took the opposite form, from koinonia, meaning community. Monks and nuns lived together under shared rules in walled compounds. They worshipped collectively, labored collectively, and copied manuscripts collectively. These Cenobitic communities would become the libraries, scriptoria, and schools that preserved classical literature and learning through the collapse of the Western Roman Empire. Step back, and a striking pattern emerges. Every pressure Rome applied produced a Christian institution that outlasted Rome itself. First, state persecution drove the theology of martyrdom. Every martyr became a recruitment tool. Every death proved the depth of Christian conviction. The movement grew stronger with each attempt to crush it. Second, intellectual attacks from thinkers like Galen and Celsus forced the emergence of Christian apologetics. To defend their faith against classical philosophy, Christians engaged that philosophy directly. Their theology became intellectually rigorous in the process. Justin Martyr and others didn't run from Roman criticism, they answered it on Roman terms. Third, a hostile world drove withdrawal into monasticism. Monastic communities, both eremitic hermits and cenobitic compounds, became the institutions that preserved classical literature, philosophy, and learning through the centuries after Rome's collapse. Three pressures, three responses, three institutions that shaped Western civilization for a millennium. Rome's attempt to destroy Christianity produced the very foundations, a theology of sacrifice, a tradition of intellectual defense, and a network of monastic communities that carried Christian civilization forward for 1,000 years after Rome itself was gone.